7 o'clock. Glad you're here tonight. Hope you had a good day. Hope you had a good 4th of July. Yesterday was Saturday all day. And today is Monday. So I had to keep reminding myself, today's Wednesday. But glad everybody's here. Good to have our visitors with us as well. We'll begin the word of prayer. And Mark Thomas, would you lead some prayer, please? We're just looking at some verses in the Bible that sometimes we look at and read and wonder really what they mean, or maybe there's certain words there in a verse that give us a little better definition, understanding of what the Lord's trying to get across to us. And as far as I go on this, it's probably our last Wednesday on this. So if you have a topic or verse or anything you want us to cover beginning next week, just let me know and we can go in that direction. But in Philippians chapter 2 and verse 6, we have a verse here, a New King James Version and the American Standard Version. It says, who being in the form of God did not consider it robbery to be equal with God. Then American Standard Version, which I like the way it says it better, who existing in the form of God counted not the being on equality with God a thing to be grasped. The word I like in the American Standard is the word grasp. You know, some people, because of their position in life, or maybe because of their education, they think that certain jobs are beneath them. I would never do that. I would never go that direction. That's for somebody else to do. And therefore, they wouldn't even think about doing it. Here's Christ. He's deity. I mean, he's all God, deity. And he has no problem to come to earth. He has no problem to come here and to live among the people and eventually dying for mankind. He has no problem doing that. And he could have said, he's deity now. He could have said, well, I'm not going. I'm too important. Let's let somebody else do it, or maybe let's let an angel do it. I have a job here to do, and besides, I don't want to go through that. He could have said that, but he didn't say it. He could have threw a fit, and God could have got a hold of him and trying to push him out of heaven, trying to get him through the door, and he's putting his arms up against the door frame, and God finally gets him out and kicks him down. And he comes to this earth, and then he does what he does. He could have done that as well, but he didn't. But he came to this earth knowing what he was going to face, and he willingly did it, come to this earth. And the thing there to be grasped, he didn't consider his deity something to hold on to heaven with and say, I'm not going because of who I am. He let go of it. He let go of heaven. He didn't grasp it. He came to this earth knowing what he's going to do, and he came here with joy. In Hebrews 12 and verse 2, it speaks of the joy set before him. Now that meaning is not that the joy set before him was, he enjoyed death. He enjoyed the pain and the suffering. He didn't enjoy that. But what he did enjoy was knowing what his pain and suffering were going to accomplish for mankind. That he enjoyed. Knowing that his coming, leaving heaven, come to this earth, and for 3 years, dealing with mankind, and then giving his life the way he did, to bring about salvation, brought him a lot of joy. So they're a thing to be grasped. He didn't look at it that way. He willingly gave it up. Glad to give it up because he knew what it was going to accomplish in coming to this earth. So two verses, one verse there, but one version puts, I think, a little bit maybe easier to understand than maybe the other. The next is 2 Thessalonians 1:8. In flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who do not know God and on those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. Sometimes the question is asked, I've heard it been asked a lot of times, what about the individuals who live in some third world country, maybe out here in some jungle somewhere, that had never heard of Jesus, that had never had a Bible before? What's going to happen to them? Are they going to be lost when the judgment comes? If the Lord comes to them on the day of judgment, what will be the outcome for these individuals? Well, the Bible tells us here what the outcome is going to be. On those who do not know God, the vengeance of the Lord will be upon them. And some say, well, that doesn't sound right. Well, if ignorance will save a person, then why teach them the gospel? If ignorance is what will save an individual, then why do we send missionaries out? Or why does any of us talk to anybody else about, salvation, about Christ, about the church? If ignorance will do that. If ignorance will say, why did God even come, or Christ come to this earth to begin with? If ignorance will save a person. But a person is not lost because they did not obey the gospel. A person is lost because of sin. That's why a person is lost. And I think it's Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All have sinned. That would include everybody. So for one to think that staying in ignorance is good, that's not good. A person is still lost. And what we're trying to do is speak to those and show those that what the gospel is all about and teach them so they will not remain in this kind of ignorance. So that question comes up sometimes. That's the answer to it. People are lost because of sin. Because of sin, they're lost. Then in 2 Thessalonians 1:9, these shall be punished with everlasting destruction from the presence of the Lord and from the glory of his power. These, being back in verse 8, those who do not know God, those who do not obey the gospel, those are the one that's going to be punished. But the most terrible thing about this punishment is it's going to take place from the presence of God. God is not going to be there in this torment for all that one will spend all eternity in. He's not going to be there. And no matter how many times one there screams out, begs for mercy, God's not going to hear. He's not there. And that's the terrible thing about the eternal destruction in the devil's hell, is God's presence is not there. There's no hope whatsoever. Today we have hope. Today we can cry out to God, ask for God's help. We are in his presence. But a time is coming for those who are lost. No more presence of God. He's not there. And there's where it comes down to no hope whatsoever for these individuals. So those two verses go together, 2 Thessalonians 1:8 and 9. But the terrible thing about being lost away from the presence of God. In Mark 6 and verse 48, this is when Jesus walks on the water, and he calls Peter out to him, and Peter walks for a short distance there before he begins to sink. But it says in verse 48, that he saw them straining at rowing, for the wind was against them. Now about the fourth watch of the night he came to them, walking on the sea, and would have passed them by. It was his intentions to walk by them. Here they were in this boat, not making any progress. And his intentions were to pass by, but he didn't. He didn't pass them by. The disciples see him, and I guess he feels obligated to stop and to render assistance to them, as he did. And there he, stills the storm, and everything is in good shape. But to be in their presence, to not pass by them, was to show a showing of strength is what he was doing, to be there in front of them. We've seen probably some of these certain days of the year, some of these foreign countries like Russia, China, North Korea, that how the military will parade itself in front of these leaders. And boy, everything is just wonderful as far as these men. They're all dressed perfectly. They're marching perfectly, all these major weapons. What they're doing, they're passing in front of the you might say these high-ranking leaders to show the power. Is what they're doing. And that's what Christ is doing here, as he does not pass them by, as he walks there in front of them, as they see him. This is a demonstration, going to be a demonstration of his power of walking on water. So he was going to, but he didn't. And because he didn't, and there in front of them, they saw just what kind of power he had. Remember, he was only one or two people that ever walk on water. Peter did, as we know, for a short distance, but only one that we ever know in the Scriptures to walk on water. But this is not an uncommon thing in the Scriptures for God to show his power in such a way. In Exodus chapter 33, 19 through 22, God is going to pass by Moses. Not to neglect him, but to show him who he is. It says here, then he said, I will make all my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim the name of the Lord before you. I will be gracious to whom I will be gracious. I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no man shall see me and live. And the Lord said, here is a place by me, and you shall stand on the rock. So it shall be, while my glory passes by, that I will put you in the cleft of the rock, and will cover you with my hand while I pass by. So here's the strength, the power of God is going to pass by Moses, and God is showing him the power that he has, but yet Moses can't see it. He can't look at it, because if he does, he dies. Just seeing God himself. So here we have an illustration. Christ let the disciples see his power. They're walking and calming to see. But here God's not going to do it. Not going to let Moses see it. Another time when God did this was when he dealt with Elijah in 1 Kings 19:11. Remember, Elijah sold her down and out, thinking he's the only prophet left. And here is Ahab and Jezebel are after him to kill him. And he's in this cave. And, well, God's fixing to show him his power, the power that he has. He's going to pass by that of Elijah. There it says that he said, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord. And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks into pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind, and after the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. So here the Lord passes by. Elijah sees this. Pretty amazing stuff to see. The strong wind, the earth quaking around him. I don't have the verse here, but what was the last thing God did to prove to Elijah who he was? The whisper, the soft words he said to him. In all of this power and might that God has, he can be very, very soft. He can whisper as well. So the small voice. So here we see that Elijah, he was fortunate enough to see the power of God as God passed by. And that gave him encouragement to know that he was not alone. And of course, God told him that there's 7,000 other prophets have yet to bow down to Baal. And that gave him encouragement. And he left that cave and continued doing what God gave him to do. So there's the passing by. It was more than just passing by. He was going to show them, in all cases, the deity or God himself, who he was. And then we have Revelation 1, verses 1 through 3. For a person to understand Revelation, you got to understand these first 3 verses. If you miss the first 3 verses, then you miss everything about the book. And you could get off in some kind of details and looking for things, trying to find things that are not there, that the Lord never intended. And many people want to pass by the first 3 verses. We'll jump into, what does this mean? What does that mean? Trying to figure all of it out. But they don't know the first 3 verses. They're going to be lost trying to figure it out. Not that it's an easy book. And sometimes it takes several times of studying, going through it, to really get a grasp of what's going on. But here's the importance of these 3 verses. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave him to show his servants, things which must shortly take place. And he sent and signified it by his angel to his servant John, who bore witness to the word of God and to the testimony of Jesus Christ, to all things that he saw. Blessed is he who reads and those who hear the words of this prophecy, who keep those things which are written in it, for the time is near. 3 things. First, John says, what you're seeing, what I'm fixing to show, what God's fixing to show John, will shortly come to pass. It's going to happen quickly. Not that it's going to happen, in 2,000 years from the time he speaks this. If the Lord's intention here is for this to happen in 2000 or 2000 something year, then what benefit would it be to those of the first century? What benefit would it be to them? He's speaking to those individuals there at the time. And these Christians, these early Christians, are being greatly persecuted by the Roman Empire. And Satan is using the Roman Empire as his tool to try to stop them, to wipe out Christianity, trying to do that. But here John is being told, these things that you're seeing are going to shortly take place. And I don't think 2,000 years from the time is said is something that will shortly take place if he's meaning today. But many try to make it seem like today. He also says there in verse 1, and he sent and signified it by angels to his servant John. Signified or figurative language. Signs and symbols. That's what he's using here to get this across. And many think that John is receiving this in such a way so that the Roman authorities will not understand it. But those who understand God, who know something about the Old Testament, would understand what John is saying to them. To go in and try to understand Revelation without any knowledge of the Old Testament, it's going to be near about impossible to understand it. You've got to know something about the Old Testament. You've got to know something about the signs and symbols that the prophets used to try to relay things, and how John brings that over as well. You've got to know something about that. So if you don't know anything about that, that may be difficult for somebody to figure it out. And then there in verse 3, he concludes it there again, for the time is near. He's told them twice. It will shortly take place, and the time is near. So the time that he's telling here, this is going to happen pretty soon. And it happened. John wrote this around 100 A.D. It's hard to say when it all started, when the Roman government failed, collapsed, but again, God was responsible for that, for bringing all this about, caused it to happen. Now, a good thing about the things he talks about signified, or the figurative language, or the signs and the symbols. Again, to understand some other teachings of the New Testament, you need to know some things about the Old Testament. A good one would be Matthew 24 and verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Now, in the first 32 verses of Matthew 24, Christ is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem. That's going to happen in 70 A.D. After verse 32, he begins to talk about his second coming. Because in verse 32, if you read it, he says, this generation that he's speaking to will see these things happen, what he's just spoken about. So some people look at this, and they don't see verse 32. They want this to say, oh, this is talking about the second coming. And they try to bring all this premillennial things in, the rapture, tribulation, the Antichrist, and all this kind of stuff coming in, and they tie it in here, and they look at this verse right here, and they take this verse literally. They literally believe that the sun is going to be darkened, that the moon is not going to give forth its light. Well, if the sun goes dark, the moon's not going to give forth any light. Or the stars will fall from heaven. Or the powers of heaven will be shaken. They believe all this is going to happen. But you got to know something about this language that's used in the Old Testament. Because anytime this language is used, such as this, the sun going dark, the moon going dark, there are some verses that speak of I think it's the moon pouring out blood. Those verses are used to mean that something is fixing to end. A kingdom is about to cease in existence. And what's fixing to happen here, what Christ is saying, the Jewish kingdom, as they know it, is about to end. Now, it really ended at the cross. When Christ died, the New Testament came into effect, and really it ended, but it wasn't visual until 70 A.D. when Rome invaded Jerusalem and destroyed everything. And none of the Jewish individuals there know anything about their heritage anymore. Destroyed it all. So therefore, that was a sign, a symbol here to them that these early Christians would recognize this is coming to an end. God no longer respects or sees the Jewish people as his chosen people. Now it's all those who the Lord will save. Those are his chosen people, those he wants to save. And a good example of this is in Joel chapter 2. And here we find that, remember, Peter quotes this in Acts chapter 2. Joel says that the earth quakes before them, the heavens tremble, the sun and moon glow dark, and the stars diminish their brightness. So in 2 verse 10, he's talking about this new kingdom, the church that's coming into play, and the old way of doing things, the Jewish system, is going to be over. 2:31, the sun shall turn into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great awesome day of the Lord. And then 3:15, the sun and moon will grow dark, and the stars will diminish their brightness. Joel is saying this new kingdom is coming. We know it to be the church. The new kingdom is coming. That's where the Lord's going to put the saved. He's going to put them in this kingdom. And there in the end, he will save that kingdom, his bride, the church. He will save it. And then present that bride before God as his perfect bride. That's what he will do. So this figurative language that Joel uses is showing the downfall of the Jewish system. It's over. And you'll go through the book of Revelation, you'll find, again, a lot of symbolism that's used in the Old Testament. It's good to know that. To know what that means. It will help you understand what it means here in the new. So again, some will use Revelation 24, at least through verse 30, 31 or so, to think that that's the end of the world coming. And I try to prove it, but it just doesn't make sense about it. Anything on any of these? All right. We'll start something next week. I don't know yet unless you have an idea, suggestion. Tell me and we'll go that direction, or we'll